Welcome to the Girl Crush podcast with me, Donna Pesci. Today, my guest is Ami Angelowicz, an award-winning writer, producer, digital marketer, entrepreneur, and author of Laid Off Life, an insightful, relatable, hilarious newsletter that began as a cathartic way of finding her next move after an unexpected layoff. Ami is now the founder of Align Digital and Social, a thriving content management and strategy company. On today's episode, we delve into the struggles of self-promotion, how to let your creativity flourish, the road to becoming an entrepreneur, how to sell a movie script, and so much more. Thanks for joining us. Here's my chat with Ami Angelowicz. Hi, Ami. Thanks for joining the Girl Crush podcast.
Hi, Donna. I'm really excited to be here. I think I have a crush on being a guest on your podcast today. So
oh my gosh, I love it. I am so excited to have you here because your writing and your kind of journey really speaks to me. So in reading a lot of things that you've written, I feel like I just relate to it so much. So there's so much that I want to talk to you about. But first, I want to kind of start at the beginning. You're a producer and digital marketer and podcaster and like all of these different things, but mainly you're, I think, a writer, you would say. And I think to make a living as a writer is a really incredible thing. And it's a really incredible talent. I love to write myself. But
Awesome.
to make a living at it, for me, I think it's just dreamy and amazing. And so I'd love to hear kind of how you got started and how you kind of built a career as a writer.
Sure. So let me clarify. Sometimes I'm making a living as a writer and sometimes I'm not.
Okay.
Which I think is the reality of wanting to kind of make your living that way. So going a little bit back in time. So I started off as an actress. So I acted from when I was a kid until my mid 20s, and I went to NYU. I went to Tisch. I studied theater. It was like I lived, breathed, and slept it. And after college, I went to LA and I was auditioning, and I was just so miserable. I was so miserable. And I kind of just felt like, I had outgrown that. I had outgrown wanting to be an actor, but I still always was obsessed with storytelling. And it kind of, it took me a minute, and I was like, I was teaching theater. I went to grad school. I thought maybe I wanted to be a therapist, but it turned out I just liked hearing people's stories. The storytelling theme keeps coming back. And I ended up moving back to New York, and I was working on Broadway production. And one day I was pushing like this giant set piece down 11th Avenue in the dead of summer. And I was like, I don't want to be doing this. Like, I really want to be writing. And I want to be the person writing the scripts, not the person pushing the set pieces. So, it was 2008, 2009. And actually the way I started my writing career, and I had always written, in my journals, and I had tried to write plays, and I wrote short stories. But the way that I transitioned was that I was laid off, which was excellent for me because I never really wanted to write. And I had started this blog called What I Did Today at Work, which was really just a way for me to write about my job that I hated so much. And, it started getting me excited about going to work to get new material for my blog. And I used some of that writing to start selling pieces to digital publications and writing online. And about a year after I got laid off, I landed a regular staff job at a women's lifestyle website, which no longer exists. But I was there for 5 years, and I worked my way up from a contributing writer to a senior editor there. And then I was recruited by Discovery to help them launch a website for one of their networks. And that leads me into my whole next leg of my career, where I was, still doing writing, but a lot less writing. And my job kept evolving, and I kept, climbing up the ladder. And, by the time I was laid off from that job last year, I was the vice president of all digital content and social media for 2 networks at Warner Brothers Discovery. And it was a great position. And, I had a large team working for me, and we got to do lots of cool and creative stuff. But the higher I rose in the ranks, the more I was sitting in meetings all the time,
Mm.
and doing all that manager stuff,
Getting
writing
away from the
reports.
creative. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, honestly, the feeling I had, this might be controversial to say, but the feeling I had when I got laid off was relief. Because I was like, you know what? I can finally get back to it now. I can get back to what I love, which is my writing, and figure out what else I'm going to do. So the layoff happened. I went through about 6 months of just total existential crisis, of what do I do now? Like, I was out of practice with being entrepreneurial for myself.
Sure.
I was giving everything I had to my job and coming up with great ideas for that, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, really.
Yeah.
And, I was applying for lots of jobs, doing what I call the throwing spaghetti at the wall method of applying for just anything. Oh, out of fear, I got to get another job. I got to figure something out. I need a paycheck. And, obviously facing tons of rejection as the media industry is kind of collapsing around me right now. And I was like, wait a minute. Why am I trying to go back and do what I was trying to get out of doing?
To get out of. Right.
So I hit pause. I really started to kind of do some of the inner work of like, okay, what do you really want to do next? Like, let's slow this down. Let's examine this. Let's figure this out. And what I did next was I launched a newsletter called Laid Off Life. And it was just a way for me to really process all the roller coaster of emotions that I was having, to just process this whole career pivot, this transition, this new chapter in my life. And, a lot of people in the media and entertainment and tech and other industries right now are getting laid off at rapid rates. And so there were actually a lot of people who were going through a similar thing as me. And, what I was writing about was resonating with them. And so I've been doing the newsletter, and from there, like, I started to like get my power back and get my strength back after launching the newsletter. I was like, okay, this is it. I'm writing again. Like, let's get rolling. And soon after that, I ended up selling a Hallmark Christmas movie,
Oh my gosh.
which was awesome. And I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I just popped out a Hallmark Christmas movie. I I had been working on concepts with a writing partner for probably 3 or 4 years. So we knew that together we wanted to write a Hallmark Christmas movie. And this was now the time that I had to, spend working on the pitch. And, then the writer's strike happened. So, we were on pause for like a long time. Then once the writer's strike was over, we were ready to put the pitches out there, and so that was really exciting. And then I'm going to exhaust you by all the different things that I'm doing, but in addition,
no, I want to hear them all. We're going to talk about them all. I want to talk about everything.
In addition to the newsletter, which was for me, this is my healing, but then it turned out to be for a community of other people. The movie, which is a long time dream of mine, got that rolling. Joined the Writers Guild. Okay. I also started my own business, because I was like, you know what? I would like to continue doing a lot of the work that I was doing at my last job, but on my own terms, where I could really kind of help clients. So I launched my company, which is called Align Digital and Social. And what I do is help individuals, businesses, and brands do, really authentic, smart content and social media strategies that resonate with their fans and kind of take the headache and fear out of the process for a lot of people. And I kind of want to just demystify the content strategy and social media process, there's a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs and personal brands and even bigger brands out there who really just kind of need help going in the right direction. They need like the right little push to kind of help promote their business, their podcasts, their brand that they're starting. So that's been wonderful. So I have clients for my business. And then I've also been doing a lot of freelance work. So I've been doing freelance writing, freelance copywriting, and freelance kind of content development for TV and podcasts, and some freelance producing. So the buffet. And I mean,
The
that
buffet.
sounds like a lot, but it was really important to me to kind of pressure test what I wanted to do next. So I said to myself, okay, I have an idea of what I think I would like to do next, but I want to pressure test that and see what I really love doing right now at this point in my life, in not in practice, not just in theory. So I purposely have wanted to try a lot of different things and kind of see which horse or horses races ahead for me.
Well, I give you so much credit for that because like I said, I relate to so many things that you're saying, in kind of having to self-reflect and figure out the next move. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And maybe, I wasn't laid off, but I moved to a different part of the country and I wasn't able to do what I was normally, what I had done my whole career. And I wasn't really sure what my next move was going to be. And I think in your newsletter, you say, you wrote something like the 8 stages
Oh
of
yeah.
of being laid off, or the 8 stages
Yeah.
of being unemployed.
Yeah.
And they just hit like so well. So I would encourage anybody to just go and just subscribe to the newsletter because it's great.
Thank you.
It's a quick read. It's funny, but like there's real substance to it. But but you do it in such a light and funny way that but it really spoke to me. And a lot of it speaks to me, but I just thought it was so funny the way that you did that because you were honest about the stages, and you, like I said, you did it in a funny way, but you said that when you got laid off, you felt relief.
I
did. I
did.
think knowing that, like having that be your like first gut instinct is, oh, that feels like a relief, is great. It wasn't, and even though you went through different stages later, right? Because you went through like, am I ever going to have a job again?
Oh, yes.
What did I do and all that? So talk to me a little bit about that, because I know you said, even though, you felt relief, you also went through all these other things.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say there's a term that I have now glommed onto called misalignment burnout. Which is a kind of burnout that we haven't heard as much about. We've heard a lot about burnout, but misalignment burnout is when you're in an environment or doing work that doesn't really align with you, with your personal values or your personal goals. So I feel like I was in a big misalignment burnout, which is why when the layoff came, and I've spoke to you about why I was in misalignment burnout, because I'm a creative person and I was doing upper level executive work. So there was a disconnect there because I wanted to be doing the creative work, right? So that's a misalignment burnout. That's why my initial reaction was relief. I've also never had trouble finding work before. I've cycled through many jobs, a couple different careers. Like, we've talked about this. I would say I'm very resourceful about finding jobs and finding work. And I think after that relief came just the shock of what the job market is right now. I had been out of it for a long time, almost a decade. No, maybe longer than I hadn't been looking for a job for, 10 plus years, right?
Yeah.
And it was the shock of like, wow, things have really changed, and it started to make me question myself. and and then cycle through the kind of like the self-doubt and then the fear and the anxiety. I think what no one tells you when you get laid off or when you go through a major change or a move like you were talking about is that even if you're excited about it, there's still like this full range of emotions that happens. Grief, like I've even lately I've been feeling grief, like not for my old job, but for my coworkers or for having a team or for having work that other people understand.
Yeah.
you
And I
know?
think too,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like people, we attach so much of who we are to what we
Mm-hmm.
do. And
Yeah.
then when we're not doing that anymore, at least I had that experience that I had to kind of
Mm-hmm.
self-reflect and try to get over. And I think that I'm a work in progress with that because
We
I
all are.
definitely attached so much of myself to what I did for a living. And then when I was no
Yeah.
longer doing it, it was like, well, now what? Like what,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
am I? And I think that you talk about that a little bit too,
I do.
in that, you're
Mhm.
you're grieving for, it's almost like that person that you maybe
Yeah,
used to be a little bit.
I'm grieving for like my old life in some ways, like the life where I'm like, people were seeking me out for things, not the other way around, where,
Yeah.
I never worried about paying my bills. And if I wanted to go shopping, I went shopping or, like things that now are, I'm self-employed now. So like, there's no guarantee of a paycheck ever.
And you have to think
Um,
about it. You have to think
right.
about it now. And
I
you
have
have
to
to
think
make
about
sure
it.
that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Well,
have to
there's a
think about
fear. I
it.
mean,
Yeah. Hmm.
it's definitely, it has to be scary. It has to be a little scary
It's
to
so
make that
scary.
transition.
It's so scary. Like I haven't even fully gotten over the fear of it yet, but I just like it goes in waves. Like, some months I'll have a great month and then some months I'll have a really tough month. Where I'm like, oh, some freelance jobs I had fell through. Some clients I had proposals to didn't respond or wanted to push back. And it's like, whoa, what am I going to do? Um,
Totally.
and I was lucky in that I saved money and, I prepared for this transition. And I was also very fortunate to have gotten, severance package and all of that stuff, which I know not everybody gets when they're going through a transition, but, and I realize the privilege of that. So I just want to say that, but it is so scary, and I literally have to spend a good deal of time just managing my own anxiety about it, about the future,
Yeah.
and just like really live in the present moment of, okay, well, I can't worry about if all of these jobs come through at once and I'm too busy, or I can't worry about having no jobs, like I just have to like proceed forward with what's in front of me and like make the best decisions I can make at that moment in time.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I think, a dance when you are an entrepreneur because there's only so many hours in the day. So it's great if you're winning all of those, those pitches that you're sending out and you're getting all of that work, but you have to kind of manage your time, making sure that you can handle it. And then there's the other side of it where even if you're, like you said, having a fabulous month, your mind is always like, well, but what about
Next
next
month.
month, or what about
Yeah,
next
like
year, or is it, and
yes,
it's like
yes.
it's never ending. I've had my own business before, and I um definitely feel like there's a give and take. I mean, you are in more control, and you can be more creative, and you can work on the things that bring you joy and that
Yes.
fulfill you. uh but then there's all those worries because you're not getting a stable paycheck,
Yes,
and
you're not
especially
getting
in the beginning. I mean,
yes,
in the
no.
beginning, you're just starting,
Yes.
you're having to get out there and sell yourself all the time. And
Oh, I hate
um
selling myself. I
I want to
hate
talk
it.
about selling ourselves. Let's talk about selling
Okay.
ourselves, because I
Yes,
know
please.
it is, I struggle with this so much. I mean, even just like doing this podcast. And then, I do this podcast. It's not in a relation to what I do for work. It is strictly a passion project. It brings me no money. It takes a lot of time.
Well,
It's a time
it
suck.
could bring you money. It could bring you money eventually.
We'll have to talk. We'll have to talk about that.
But yes, no, I hear what you're saying. It's a passion project.
It's a passion project. The only thing it brings me is joy. It brings me joy to have these conversations. I feel like it is the best part of what I do on a daily basis, and having these conversations with people like you, and just creative people and people that have just built amazing things, is inspiring to me. And I feel like if it's inspiring to me, I just want to put it out there so it's inspiring to other people. And so it's, maybe inspires somebody or empowers them or encourages them to maybe do something that they hadn't ever thought of doing, or that they didn't think that they could do. And that's my whole goal in this is really just to do that. But in order to have anyone listen to your podcast or have anyone
you do have to
know about your newsletter, you have to promote it, which means promoting yourself. And
I know.
It's funny. There's a friend of mine that kind of listens to how you have those friends that will like be honest and give you the,
and will tell you.
So
they'll give you the real deal.
So I have a friend who just was catching up on all my podcasts, and she was like texting me all these things. And she's like, you edit so much I could tell that you're editing what you're saying, that you are not really giving anything of yourself. There was like a podcast that she listened to, and she's like, you're not in it. Like, you're not in it anywhere. And it's your podcast, and you need to be. And I was like, well, yeah. And I think about when I'm editing and, things that I do, and I'm like, yeah, I'm always kind of editing myself. And I'm like, I want the other person to, to kind of shine in that moment, because that's what it's all about. And she's like, yeah, but it can't be a one-sided conversation. You have to be a part of that.
You have
too,
a lot to, but you also have like a lot to bring to the table. And, and I think, the people you have conversations with, like me and your listeners, will want to hear from you and hear your point of view on things, Yeah.
So it's so hard. Like, I mean,
I know it is hard.
Getting back to self-promoting and getting out there and promoting ourselves. So how do you talk to yourself? How do you talk yourself into doing it? Or what do you do to kind of get over that hump?
Well, first of all, let me say that it took me 1 entire year to announce my business on social media. Okay?
I saw that.
Okay. I did that recently. I've had my business for a year, and it took me a full year to do that. So if that gives you any idea. But I will say this is what I do for a living, and what I do for my clients is I help them self-promote. But what I realized was, while I was doing this for major brands, right, for a long time, I completely neglected my own self-promotion. I did no self-promotion of my own. And let's be honest, it's very essential to do your own self-promotion, whether you're an entrepreneur, a podcaster, or you work for a company, right? It's very important to do that. So, okay, here's what I did. And this is what I tell my clients too. I started off really small. Okay. I started off being like, okay, which platforms do I feel comfortable being on? What formats do I feel comfortable sharing in? I'm like, okay, I love to write, love the written word. Like, let's start there. Okay. And launching my newsletter was a way for me to self-promote without self-promoting. So instead of saying, hey, I'm looking for a job, I'm looking for clients, I'm like, I was able to say, hey, here's this thing I wrote about what's going on. Hey, subscribe to my newsletter. And it was a way to kind of stay top of mind for people. So that was the first step. I would say the second thing that I, tell my clients and tell myself to think about is authenticity. So what do you really care about? What do you really have to say? what value do you have to add? Like, what do you really care about saying? Because I think a lot of people think that promoting yourself is just like, hey, twice a week I have to be on LinkedIn and just post something, right? Is that going to resonate with people? Probably not. What's going to resonate with people is talking about or sharing things that you care about that are relevant to them or relevant to that platform. So think about, what's authentic to you. And then I would say, another thing that's really important, and I know this from my experience doing this again for major brands for a really long time, is consistency. You have to be consistent. You have to just do it every week. Pick a day, or if you're going to do once a month, pick a day. You're doing it every month, once a week, no matter what. So you have to stick to it, and then you have to be patient and embrace slow growth, right? You have to be like,
Right.
okay, if I build it, eventually they will come, right? So like those are a few things that I personally do and that I advise my clients to do as well. And I think that's how you see results. Like, you have to manage your expectations, you have to be consistent, and you have to do something that's authentic and resonating with the audience you want to connect with, whoever that may be.
Yeah,
So
I think that's great advice. It's definitely, I think, it's a slow burn. It's not,
such a
when
slow
you're not
burn.
seeing results like right away, I think it's really hard. How do you feel about the whole like personal brand, the personal branding, and like, how do you approach that with your clients?
Yeah. So I I shouldn't say this, but sometimes I hate the concept of a personal brand, because I feel like it can be reductive to a person. But I do think it's important to kind of do that work of like, what is your personal brand? So I think a way that I approach it with myself and my clients is like, what are some words that describe your personal brand? Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
it that what authentically describes you, and then what do you want people to think when they see your whatever it is that you're putting out there in the world? So, you can also do the exercise. I've done this before. You can also do the exercise of like making your personal brand a fictional person, or like think about like a character. Like, oh, I want it. I want my personal brand to be like, I'm trying to think of an example, but some
I get
famous
it
person, or
totally.
right? So
Sure.
that can be like kind of an easier way to externalize that, maybe. But I think really the first part is just figuring out like, what are a few different adjectives here, that we're going for, and that can kind of be the center point of where your content strategy or your promotion strategy branches out from.
Right.
What are we going for here? Like, for laid off life, I haven't written these down, but I know that for laid off life, one of the things is honest, authentic, and relatable. So like, I want to give an honest account of what it's like to be laid off, and go through, and also like some humor too. Like, I also want people to be able to have some lighthearted, laughter about it as well. So,
Well, I think you
whenever
nailed
I'm,
it on
yeah.
that. I think you
Thank
definitely
you.
nailed it. I think,
Thank you.
the authenticity and the realness really come across.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a couple of things that you've written that are really vulnerable. And,
Yes.
you chose to kind of show that side and that vulnerability, which I think really, people really relate to. I remember you writing in one of your posts about the fact that you didn't want to say that you were laid off on LinkedIn. You never
Yes, I
wanted to
didn't.
say it
I
because
never
you
did
didn't
it.
want
I never
to.
did. Yeah.
I mean, I relate to that so much. It's like, you didn't want to put it out there, and you laid out all the reasons why you didn't want to put it out there, but they're what
Yeah.
anybody would imagine. You didn't want to appear, even though it wasn't anything that
Mm-hmm.
you had done.
No,
It was,
no, of course
an
not. Yeah.
industry thing. It had nothing to do with who you were, and it had no reflection of what you did, because
No,
you had all these great accomplishments,
I
but it
did.
still happened. And it
Yes.
happens uh,
It happens to a
all
lot of
across
people.
in every
Yes.
industry, and it happens
Yes.
to a lot of people. Um, but I think anybody that goes through something like that, even in, for whatever reason, really feels that, like, oh, like that
The
kind of
shame, some shame. There's
shame.
there's
Yeah.
some shame there. And I mean, look, I'm not immune to feeling shame. I'm like an A+ student who, always who's always on top of things, I don't want to be like, I am struggling, I was laid off, I am applying for jobs and no one's, interested in me. Why? Like so I also kind of think, in thinking about personal brand, like, a better way for me to let people know I was laid off was in a much bigger way to be like, I'm launching a newsletter called Laid Off Life. Like, I'm going to create
Right.
a brand around my layoff, because this is my life and this is my personal material. So that was authentic to me, right? I know some people who like got over it and wrote those amazing, like, LinkedIn, I was laid off, kind of posts, but I was like, I'm a different kind of thinker. I'm a little bit of a rebel. I either go big or don't go at all. So that was my personal way of doing it. But yes, I did, I do try to be as vulnerable as I can be in the newsletter, because I know other people must be having similar type of feelings and experiences as me. Like, I can't be the only one who's
Absolutely.
going through
No.
this, who's feeling this way. And so I feel comfortable enough with myself and my own vulnerability to be able to share that. But again, thinking about self promotion and self branding and everything like that, my brand of doing it is through like a piece of writing on my own website, my own site, my own newsletter, rather than like the LinkedIn post, I guess
Right.
is
Right.
how
But
how
it
I
really
frame that.
does. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
know the way that you, I mean, it really kind of is genius, the way that you decided to go about it, whether it was for your own therapeutic, way
It
of doing
was.
things,
Yeah.
and that's great. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
decided to, and I write as well, not ever professionally,
Mm-hmm.
but I love to write. I've written a ton of things that I wouldn't even put on a website. And I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
get over that fear and like try to start doing it and putting it out there, because I do love to write. But just doing it in that way, that was authentic to you. And it's such a lesson to people that if you are authentic to your own feelings, that it's going to be all that more relatable. And
Yeah, and I mean, yes, and I would say, and obviously I've been writing for a long time, and there's this term when you're writing, which is, blood on the page, right? Like, you want to go deep and leave the blood on the page, right? Like, you have to kind of really say what's really happening, right? Not like some glossy version of it, and not try to like wrap it up in a clean bow. Also, it's
right,
about being vulnerable but also making people able to understand that. So, it's not just an
right,
emotional spew. you're
right,
you're
right.
kind of going for something. But, you know, I try to, when I write anything, leave blood on the page, share honest
I love that. I've never
experiences.
heard that
Yeah.
before. Leave blood on the page. All right, I like that. I'm
I
going to
mean,
start
maybe I'm
using
getting
that.
the phrase wrong, but I feel like that's it. So, what I say to myself too, like, even though I've been doing this for a long time, writing, and, when I worked for the women's website, I was writing personal essays all the time. And I can't even tell you like how many horrible comments and how much hate. Um, for a long time, I didn't want to do that anymore, but, now I do again. But I will say that what I say to myself is like, I am living my life. I am a writer, and like I'm sharing it, and people, they can like it, they can hate it, they cannot read it. But like ultimately, do I feel better for having done it and shared it, or do I feel better keeping it to myself? I feel better having done it and shared it, even if people hate it, don't read it, don't appreciate it. Do you know what I
I
mean?
love that. I no, I
Yeah.
absolutely do, and I love that. It is unfortunate that there's always haters of
Of
things that
course,
when you
of
put
course.
something out there, and I think you have to really be prepared for that in any aspect,
Yes, you
whether
do.
it's social media or whatever.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to talk about, you wrote something
Hmm.
about comparison, the
Oh,
comparison trap.
yes. Yes. Yeah.
And that was something that was a post that really was speaking to me as well, because I'm
Hmm.
going through it, and you kind of discuss how we see other people out there all
Oh,
on social
yes.
media, and you're like, oh my god, that like everyone around me is just killing it, like everyone around me
Yes.
is doing this and that,
Everyone but
and I'm
me.
just, yeah, everyone but me, and like I'm trying it, and I have all these ideas, and it struck such a chord in me too, because I feel I have like these times where I'm feeling like so inspired, and I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
this is going to go to this, and all the puzzle pieces are going to work, and this is all these things are going to happen, and this is really what I want to build. And you'll be like scrolling through social media, and I'll see people that I am really inspired by, and I'm like, oh, like she's doing it so well. Like she is
Yeah.
doing it. What I am trying to build, like she's doing it so well. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, maybe she's really the one that's supposed to be doing it. And like, could I do it that well? I don't know if I could do it that well. And then it's like, well, hey, maybe that's because you're like doom scrolling at 2 o'clock on a
Yeah.
Wednesday. Like maybe you're just the loser that's like not actually doing it. And you're like sitting there for an hour and a half scrolling through TikTok. Like maybe you should be actually doing it. But there are those, those times when you're like, oh, but this person is kind of doing that, and they've already
Yes.
got that kind of down, or like maybe
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
too old to do this, or too
Oh, yes.
out of this to do that. There's always like all those things, and I think that piece that you wrote about comparison really kind of resonated and brought that out.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah, I will say this. I still struggle with this all the time. I feel like it's very normal. Um, and I mean, I relate to everything you're saying. I have all of those feelings myself. But I will say, like, I'll give an example. So, right, like I said, I recently joined the Writers Guild, and I'm new, and I'm trying to break into television writing at a time when it's the most difficult to possibly break into it, because there's such a contraction in the market. And had a meeting with new members, and was hearing about all their credentials, and I was like, oh, I don't belong here. Like, I haven't done enough, I'm not good enough, and I have such a far way to go. And I can tell you that that way of thinking can be absolutely paralyzing to doing
yeah,
your work. And I say I mean me, I mean you, I mean everyone. And the recent reframe that I've kind of come up with for myself, although I still do feel this, and I have entire days when I'm like, I can't do this. Like, there's no way, this is going to take too much time, I'm too old, I should have started this 20 years ago, and what am I doing? That I tell myself, like, okay, you're on your own journey, you're on your own timeline, right? It's not anybody else's timeline. And then I look at the whatever person I'm looking at and being like, they're doing this better, they have more experience, and I say, like, what inspiration can I take from what they're doing? Right? What is it
that's really
that's
smart.
like inciting this thing in me? Like, oh, I love the way they're doing this. Okay, is that something I want to try? Right? um and then I can try I can experiment with it. But I also think it's important to remember, like, when you see people and they're killing it at whatever they're doing, that there's a lot of hard work that has gone into them getting to that place. And I remind myself, like, when it comes to business, okay, you've been in business for yourself for a year, like, cut yourself some slack. Okay, you're not a millionaire yet. You're not, you're not,
Sure.
you're not, you're not doing X, Y, and fine. That's okay. You've
Right.
been doing this for a year, right? Or if I'm like, oh, like I have so much, like I don't know how I'm ever gonna like compete with these other writers and whatever. It's like, don't worry about that. Do your work. Like learn. Do your work. Keep learning. Because the more you do
Yeah.
something, when you put hours into it, you get better at it. You just do. You get that, what is it? The 10,000 hours to become an
Yeah.
expert at something. And it's like, have you put in your 10,000 hours?
Right.
Is
Right.
there more work to do? Is there a class you need to take? Is there assistance you need? Is there support you need to like kind of up level? If that's what you want. But I think when you're like an ambitious person or a competitive person, it's normal to look at things that way. But I try to be like, I'm on my own journey. My journey is original and unique to only me.
Right. And that's, I think, a really important lesson too for all of us, including me, to really think about too, because we all are on a different journey and we all want different things
Yeah. Yeah.
out of life. But it is good to hear that you have those
Oh my
moments too,
God.
and those moments of self-doubt
Crippling,
and
just
all of that.
crippling. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
my biggest problem is self-doubt, and that's what can make self-promotion, selling yourself so hard. Because, like I'm a person, if you haven't noticed already from our conversation, from the work I do, I value like authenticity and honesty a lot.
Yeah.
And that sometimes doesn't belong in the world of self-promotion, right? The world of self-promotion is like,
there's, yes,
I'm my
you're
own
right.
hype
There's a
man, right?
definitely, yes, 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 which is very hard to do.
It's
It's very hard to
very
do if you
hard
don't
to
have that.
do. Right.
Yeah.
If you're not
Yeah.
feeling it that day, if you're not like, yeah, I'm fucking killing it, right? Like you're like, yeah, it's a mixed bag. You're like, I'm doing well at this. Like, this is not going as great as I want. I'm a little unmotivated, right? How do I go out there and like be my own hype man right now? So,
Right. And I think the answer to that, and part of what you said, and part of what I try to do myself is just like you said, like leave the blood on the page or whatever that is, that saying is. I feel like you have to just do it, because I find like I'll have an idea for something that I think is really interesting for like a TikTok or, like an Instagram reel.
mhm.
And it'll come to me because of a real reason. I've read
Right.
something, or I've had a good conversation with somebody, and I'm like, oh, I should do like a TikTok about that. And for whatever reason, I like am sweaty from the gym and I don't like the way I look, or I'm like busy and I'm just like, I'm just going to get through this and then I'll do it later. Or, for whatever reason, I don't do it. When you go back later and say like, I had that idea that I wanted to do, you'll talk yourself out of it. You will
Right.
just
You
find a
can.
reason why it doesn't sound as great then, or you don't have that inspiration that you did in
Right.
that moment when you
That's
read
true.
that piece or when you had that conversation. Because
Yeah.
when it's fresh is when you should and I just my lesson,
Mm-hmm.
to anyone
Let's
that
just do
wants to
it.
take it, is to just do it. Just put it out
Yeah.
there, just do it. And I try to tell myself, what is the worst possible thing that could happen?
That nobody
Nobody
looks at it.
watches
No one
it.
cares. Like, who cares?
No
Yeah.
one cares like if that's the
Yeah.
worst possible thing, maybe that's a good thing if nobody sees it. I might go back
Well,
later and say that wasn't the greatest, piece of content that I could have put out there,
yeah,
but
sure.
I did
But
it.
why not? Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, and I'll yes and that, yes. And like, I have a lot of ideas and sometimes they come in the middle of the night or when I'm working out or whatever. And I can't do them right then. And what I do is I just have a list, I just keep a list on my phone. I just write it down. I jot it down and then I go back to it later. And if I'm like, nah, this idea like doesn't prove out, it goes to the idea graveyard. There's some ideas that are in the graveyard and then like maybe I'll pull them out another time later when I'll be like, this is actually the way I want to do this, right? So just like even honoring your ideas by just writing them down, whether you do them or not, I think is really powerful to just be like,
That
okay, I
makes a
have
lot of
it,
sense. Yeah. That
and
makes
then,
sense
you can
because
decide. Yeah.
yeah,
Continue.
and sometimes you can go back and say that was a good idea, but it
Mm-hmm.
needs to be fleshed out more, or there's
Yes.
something deeper there, I need to kind of like play with it a little bit in order to
Yeah.
really get the good substance out of it before you put it
Yeah.
out.
Or there's
Right?
another angle to it, or like, oh, maybe this belongs in another format. Like I'm kind of dealing with that right now. I wrote 100 pages of a novel that I was so excited about, right? And I got to a certain point, and I think at the time I didn't do enough like outlining or plot concepting, and I just like hit kind of a wall with it. And 8 years later, I'm like, this is actually a TV show. It's not a
Oh my
novel, right?
gosh.
Like, so
Really?
I do believe, so like I'm working on it again in a different format. So I do believe that like your ideas or your stories, they definitely matter. And I'm a person who I believe like it will find the right format to live in at some point. You know,
Yeah.
if
I
it's
love
really
that.
important to you, it will find the right format. And I try to be open to and flexible about format of things as well. To be like, okay, maybe this is a blog post, maybe this is a piece of social media, maybe this is a podcast, maybe this is a TV show, maybe this is a movie, maybe it's a book. Just so that you're letting your ideas like lead the way and tell you how they want to be told, kind of. So,
That's such an interesting point that you make, because this podcast that I'm doing is because
mhm.
of a piece of writing that I did, and I didn't have
Awesome.
any idea what it really was. I think it was just a way of, I was feeling a lot of like discontent in who, after my move here, and like what I wanted to do, and I was doing a lot of like kind of self-reflection
Mhm.
into the things that have brought me joy throughout my career. And I don't even know, but I started writing it, and I worked on it almost just like a therapy session whenever I kind of needed to. And it just came out of that. Like, that is literally how I ended it, saying, and kind of like, and this is why I'm going to start a podcast. And I
Love that.
don't know anything about podcasting. I didn't know anything then. I barely know anything now.
That's not
I'm
true.
out there doing it.
You're learning. No, you've got a podcast feed, you've got images, you've got guests, you're doing it consistently, you've got awesome people on, and
Thank you.
yeah,
I'm doing
you're
it,
learning.
but I
Mhm.
didn't. Thank you. I appreciate that, but I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about it. But it was just the way that that piece of writing like manifested itself into a
Mhm.
podcast.
I
So
love
it's
that.
interesting that you said that. It really kind of that really
Yeah.
resonates with me. And also, I feel
Mhm.
so during COVID, I had a long stretch of time. My husband and I was actually traveling a lot, and I was here in Florida. We did not live here full time, but I was just kind of like living out
Mm.
COVID here.
Mhm.
And I feel so bad when I say this, because I know so many people like had such a hard time during COVID and really
Yeah.
struggled. But it was the most creative time. And I was like kind of living my best life. Like I was
I'm actually with
what
you. I'm with
it
you.
really was like
Parts of it,
great, like
not
a
all of it,
crazy
but
time. Right, of
yeah,
course.
but
And
not
there were
all of it,
definitely
but
things that were not great.
there was a large chunk of time for me also when I felt very creative, and I got a lot of creative work done.
Yeah. And you have those times, and you reminded me that I need to go and revisit it, because I was, I was always, it was beautiful weather here, and I was like biking and walking, but I didn't have any responsibilities in terms of like
Uh-huh.
work or anything like that. And I started writing what I thought was like a TV show. Not that I was ever
Uh-huh.
going to do anything with it, but I had this
Why not?
idea, and I would go for
Yeah.
these long rides on my bike, and I had these characters, and they would like develop in my head, and then I would come home and I would write them on the page. And it was just such a fun time and such a, and of course then, life kind of takes over and I don't think I've looked at it in, a
You
couple
need to
of
go back
years.
and read it. You need to go back and read it. Why can't
I
you
need
write
to
a
go back.
TV show? Yeah, you
I don't
can.
know. I don't know,
No.
but I'm going to go back and read it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about writing a TV show. Let's
Yeah.
I know
Let's
that you
talk
were a
about it.
writer and you had
Yeah.
obviously, a lot of background in
Mm-hmm.
writing, but writing and selling a TV show is like,
Yes.
or it's a movie. It was a movie, a TV
It's a
movie.
movie. It's a movie.
It's a
Yeah.
TV
And
movie.
it's a TV. It's a movie, but it's for TV. Like it's not a theatrical release movie. But
So
yeah.
talk to me about that. And like,
Yes.
is the idea that you were talking about earlier that you thought it was something and then you thought it was a novel and it became a TV show, or
it
is
was
it something else?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, it's another project that I'm working on now.
Okay.
The novel to TV show. But no, so actually the idea for the Christmas movies came about during COVID as well.
Okay.
It was such a weird, dark time. And, professionally, I was burnt out, as I've said. And my networks that I worked for were a true crime network and a paranormal network. So I was dealing with a lot of dark material, right? Which I like dark material. So that's not I'm not being pejorative about it, but it's dark material. And I found one of my favorite times of year, even though I'm Jewish, is Christmas time. My birthday is a few days before Christmas, and I love the festiveness of the holiday season, and I have an alter ego at the holidays that I call Elfowitz, which is just it's me, but I like to give, like it's fun to give and to do fun things around the holidays. So I was, I was watching a bunch of Christmas movies and I was like, gosh, I would love to write a Christmas movie. Like they're so joyful,
Yeah.
And that was when I started coming up with some of the ideas. And like I said, I have a writing partner who I've been working with on them. And, I went to her and I was like, you want to write a Christmas movie together? And she was like, sure. I mean, she writes other kinds of stuff. The Christmas thing was new for her too, but she's a TV writer and a writer as well. And she's like, sure, let's do it. So we came up with a few concepts. We pitched them through a producer to a network who passed on all of them, and we didn't really get any feedback. But then after the layoff, I was kind of ready to revive. I was like, hey, wait, let's revisit these Christmas movie concepts. I had a contact at Hallmark and learned more about what they were looking for and how they take their pitches. So I was like, asked my contact, like, hey, can I pitch you? And she was like, yeah, okay, sure. So we went back, then the writer's strike happened and we had 6 months of, just like, we can't pitch anything anywhere anyway. So we spent that time and we just kind of fleshed out 5 different concepts that we were excited about. And they ended up wanting to move forward with one of them. It was a long process. Like, I think the way that we pitched to them was just through like a paper, like a 2-page paper pitch document of just basically an overview of the entire film concept. I think we had to rewrite that pitch document 3 or 4 times before they moved it into development. So that was even like a long process, but it was, it was really cool. And we're still in the middle of the process, like we haven't gotten our final script option yet, to finish the script and, get it produced. So like way they do it is they buy the story, they pay you for the story, you outline the entire movie, and then they option the script from there. So, we're still mid process, and, hoping to hear very soon.
But what a cool experience to go through.
It's been very cool. Yeah.
I want to say too, to anybody that's listening, there are people every day that say, have an idea like that, like, oh, I love
Mhm.
Christmas, and like, oh, I have this idea for a movie. But the point is that barely, 0.0001% of people actually do it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
to move forward and to do it, and to sell it, to go ahead and,
Yeah.
and sell it, I think is really amazing. So, I love that. I love that you went for
Yeah.
it and that you did
Yeah.
it.
And I mean, look, there's a chance they won't option the script and it won't get made, and that's okay. Like, I still sold a movie to them and it was an idea I
Absolutely.
had. And like, I still feel really great about it because it was the seed of an idea, and I had the chance to develop it out. I had a chance to outline the entire movie, and get paid to do that. And it was
Wow.
it was just so much. I cannot tell you how much fun it was
I
to
bet.
write that. It's just been so much fun, and I ask you and everyone to put the best vibes out there that, we'll get to produce this, and, that you'll get to see it next Christmas. Not
I'm sure it's going to get made. I bet
Thank
you
you.
learned too a lot about selling a
I
movie. I
did.
mean,
I did.
there's
And I
probably
mean,
so much that you learned in that
I
process.
did. So I will say this. So I have worked in the media and entertainment industry for a long time. I worked for, one of the largest global media companies in the world, and I worked with content very closely. So I know a lot, I would say, about, the process, especially when it comes to nonfiction. But learning about the process for scripted, um, was not new to me, also because I had been an actress. Like, it wasn't new to me, but it was like seeing it from a completely different side and a different angle. And I do feel like my experience as an actress and my experience as a content executive at a major media company gives me a very kind of well-rounded view of, me a well-rounded perspective, I would say. So,
Yeah,
like, I feel like a lot of writers go into the industry and they don't understand how, like, a network or a content executive is thinking, right? And I'm like, I don't understand how every content executive at every network is thinking, but I do understand the business
sure.
of television, and of streaming television. So I feel like that gives me an advantage, actually, because I can have a very clear and balanced perspective about, like, okay, well, I know that we're getting put off now because budgets are coming in at this time of year, or, oh, they just got new leadership here. So I understand that, like, they're not going to have clear marching orders right now about what they're buying, just like
Sure.
little things that will be in my mind, forever and always from
Absolutely. And I'm sure
yeah.
that helped to have a little bit of that background, and maybe
Hmm.
it helped with the anxiety a little bit, hopefully, of like in the
I
process. I'm
mean,
sure that there must be so much anxiety in that
there
process of trying to
there
sell
wasn't
something.
there wasn't a lot of anxiety in this particular process, but I think this process it's different than how other shows are sold. Like, a lot of shows are sold through production companies, and,
Yeah,
like you have to first pitch to a production company, and then you get a pitch together that you're taking around to different networks or streamers. So this process was a little bit different, and I think there's tons of anxiety in every process like this, but it wasn't so bad because I didn't have to go into the room and do like a full verbal pitch of
okay.
of a show, which a lot of times you do have to do,
Yeah, yeah.
you have to do basically a full presentation, and explain everything and talk about selling yourself. You have to sell yourself, you have to sell the show. So, I hope I get the opportunity to do that in the future for something else I'm working on, um, but we'll see.
Amazing, amazing. I
Yeah, we'll
can't
see
wait. I
how it
know it's
goes.
going to get made and it's going to come out, and I'm going to
Thank
say
you. I hope so.
I know
Yeah.
her. I know who
I
wrote
will
that.
let you know. If I do, I'm gonna have like a big. I'm gonna have a big screening party, and
Absolutely. I mean,
do
you have
something
to.
fun.
Of
Yeah,
course, you have
yeah,
to.
yeah, for
Um
sure.
So something else that I want to talk to you about. So after you
Yeah.
you got laid off and you started this newsletter, which
Mm-hmm.
again people should be reading
Mm-hmm.
because it's great.
Thank you.
Take me through the process of then beginning to start your own company, because I know you were doing
Yeah.
like a little bit of freelance stuff. You were
Mm-hmm.
getting some traction obviously from the newsletter. So
Mm-hmm.
what was the decision? Because I want to first explain a little bit about what your company does,
Yeah,
and
sure.
or
Sure.
however you want to do it, but I want to know a little bit
Yeah.
about what your company does and then how you came to that
Mhm.
conclusion that you were going to start something as opposed to just doing freelance work or finding
Yeah.
eventually something else with
Mhm.
someone else.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I had been thinking about starting a company for a long time. I was scared. I was kind of scared to paint myself in the box of like I'm a founder and I'm a solopreneur and
Yeah.
I was scared, I was scared about it. I would say that what pushed me there was basically there were types of freelance jobs that were potentially coming my way. And there was this feeling that I wanted to continue doing, like I said, parts of the work that I was doing before, which I really enjoyed. When I was parsing out, like, what do I love about my job? What didn't I love about my job? Um, One thing that really came up was, I love doing content strategy, social media strategy. Like I love doing that and helping other people in that way. So honestly, I started my business knowing I'm going to do something around that. And I was brainstorming, like, what are the packages I'm going to have and blah, blah, blah. But I was like, I might not be able to figure this all out until I start the company and see what kind of clients I get and what they need. So I did something ill advised and kind of started a company without a full business plan or a full plan of knowing what I was going to do. But for me, it was kind of low stakes to start the company. I was like, what do you need? I need to like do an LLC incorporation. I need to, get a website up. And then I need to, get some clients, right? And boom, you've got a you've got a company. And
Mhm.
let's try it and like let's see what happens. What do people need? What kind of clients come my way? And so again, it was a discovery journey that I have been going
Yeah.
on. So I don't advise everyone to do that, but for me, I couldn't figure it all out. I couldn't have a full plan before I started kind of doing the work and getting in there and seeing what people needed. So, and I also started off by doing some interviews with people I knew and just asking them questions about like, okay, I might want to work with small business owners. Like, what kind of how much time do you spend, like, can I interview you and hear about like what kind of troubleshooting you need in the digital and social space? And I had some great conversations which informed me, and then I started getting clients right pretty quickly. I started getting clients for my business, and from there it's just been kind of like a learning curve of like, okay, what's every time I write a proposal, I've been doing a lot of like custom packages for people because I'm like, okay, people don't have like one size fits all needs when it comes to this, right? And there's a lot of different things I know how to do. I can help you launch a newsletter, I can help you start a podcast, I can talk to you about monetization, I can talk to you about distribution, I can talk to you about your social media presence, your online presence, your blog, your how they all fit together. What is a great
Yeah.
content strategy for you? So where I've kind of landed over the last year is that I've been doing, custom proposals and packages for each client depending on what they need. So I can either come in and help you in an advisory way where I'm like, okay, here's some ideas for a strategy for you. Here's some types of content you can do. Here's what you need. I can come in and be like an extension of your team, like for people who need more ongoing support. I can do fractional leadership. So, if a company comes to me and they're like, we need someone to help us build a social media team and a strategy and get it going, I can do that. So that has been what I've kind of been doing up until now. And then recently, I started getting a lot of people coming to me for what they needed was something quick and affordable. Like they don't want to do long-term packages. They don't need long-term support. What they need is they need to get over the hump of like, how do I do this social media thing to either promote myself or my business or my brand? I need like a quick fix. So I just recently introduced my quick fix packages. So it's 2 hours and I will either help you, if you're a newbie, I'll help you get started. I'll help you be like, okay, where do we begin with this? And like, what can you do to get moving? Or if you're like, I'm already online and it's like kind of not working in the way I wanted it to, a quick 2 hour reset where we can kind of come up with an actionable plan about like, okay, here's the kind of content you should be focusing on. Here's a sustainable plan that you can execute. And like, let's get this moving in the direction that you want to for your goals. So I've been kind of doing that in 2 buckets with my clients. So longer term support, more in-depth guidance, and then the kind of like quick hits,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things I want to say about that. One is on your website, I want to just compliment you on the way that you have it spelled out, because I think it's very clear what you do and what you offer. And I'm saying that from experience. My husband and I have a skincare company. And so
you told me that. That's awesome.
So we it's actually it's his company, but I help out with marketing and things like that. And so I've had a lot of calls with different, types of marketing people and all of that. And some of it is so hard to navigate through what they actually offer and what they actually do. Right. And you have to, have a call to actually figure out, because you can't just look on their website because it's so convoluted and it's like, what? And it's like, what do you do? Like, what, I'm just, and I'm not like, I've been in the industry, like I get it, and I should get it. And when I don't get it, it's a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
I do. Yeah. So it was, so I do like that. I like the way that you have it split up into packages, and it's very clear. It's like, this is a package, what it's called, and this is what I do for it. And I offer custom. So I love that. And I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to say that the approach that you used, I think is kind of brilliant too. And I think that people shouldn't be afraid of it, because I started my own company. I know that when you sit down and you start to like put your business plan together, and, any research that you do and probably things that you listen to are all going to be about, you have to like define your audience. And you have to like exactly know exactly what your services are going to be. And you have to clearly define all of that stuff. And it doesn't always work that way. And I want to make that point, because it worked. It worked for you. And when I started my business, a different business that I had years ago, I was in the event and entertainment industry, and I had been an event producer for a really long time. And just by default, I had started working with a lot of like celebrity entertainment, headline acts, celebrity entertainment performers. And so I got really good at navigating those contracts and negotiating contracts. And I made a lot of really great contacts in the industries with agencies and publicists and managers and all that. So when I took a step away from doing events, I wanted to open a business that I would just be doing the entertainment portion of it. I was a little tired. I was a little like, the production is a little bit much for me. I've been doing it for, 20 years. And I want to just do the entertainment. And I started this business, and like everything that I had was just doing that. And my first call that came in was from a brand that said, I don't want a performance, but I do need somebody to help us promote this. It was for Hershey's. I do need somebody to help us promote this PR pitch that we're doing in Times Square, and I need to attach a celebrity to it. So it's just an appearance, and they have to do some media and all of this. And they were like, can you do that? And of course, when it's your own business and it's your, it was my first call. I was like, of course I can do that. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I can do that. Even though I had not done that, but it was, it was the same. It was negotiating a contract. It was still, and because I had those contacts at the agencies, I was able to call an agent and say, hey, like, this is what I have on my plate, and I'm going to need help kind of navigating through it. And of course they were like, let's do it. Let's get this done. And awesome. When I did that deal, that was what my business became. And I never thought that that's what my business was. I was not, and I think it's just the timing, and people were starting not to spend money on high end celebrity acts, but they still had to sell products. So I was doing celebrity partnerships, and attaching celebrities to brands. And it's not something that anything on my website said that I could do. It wasn't something that was in my business plan. It just wasn't, but sometimes things happen that way. So I think that having that level of flexibility, when you're starting something, like, don't close off, what your skill set is, and be open and be flexible.
Well, and also, I'm going to draw a parallel to content strategy, because that's what I do. So I tell this to myself and to my clients a lot. It's like, you just have to start somewhere, right? You can't, I've had a couple clients, but one in particular that I'm thinking of that could tend to overthink forever about, well, what's the plan and how will this work? And, it's like, you got to do it, right? You have to do it. You have to start small and see where it goes, and see what resonates, right? You have to experiment and see what resonates with your audience. And I kind of took that same approach with my business as well. I was like, I want to see what resonates with potential clients of mine. And be open to what that is. Obviously I'm not going to do something I don't know how to do at all, but there's spaces and niches and white space that people need assistance with, and you don't always know what that's going to be. So that is that's my pitch for, starting without having everything figured out. But also, that's just the kind of person I am. I'm a dive in and figure it out as I go person. And I realize not everybody is like that. Some people need to have everything planned out. But I will say that when you're an entrepreneur and starting your own thing, it's very difficult to do that without having the practice of seeing how it goes.
No, absolutely.
Along the way.
Yeah, I think that level of flexibility is really important to anyone that wants to start a business. I mean, you obviously know what your concept is and what your skills are, but just I think the advice is just to stay open and be open to what your customers are going to need. What their needs are. Let them tell you how you can help them. So I think it was really kind of smart, that approach.
Thank you. And it's the same with your online presence, right? It's the same with doing a newsletter or doing social media. You're getting that feedback and you're letting it guide you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually a really good way to look at it. You are juggling a lot of kind of different things, and you're kind of a multi-hyphenate person. Yeah. So how do you keep yourself kind of organized and sane, organized, I don't know, time management, anything that you would give advice on.
I know there's people who are like, what tools are you using to maximize your time? And like, how are you time blocking your day? And I'm like, I am not doing that.
I'm not doing that either.
I am not doing it either.
I'm glad you're not doing that. I don't feel so bad.
No, I could probably be more efficient with my time, but I would say that every day I kind of look at what are the priorities for the day. It's like what needs to get done today. What are the top, sometimes I have 5 things that need to get done all at once at the same time. And that gives me anxiety. And there's nothing I can do about that because I have several different jobs or clients with their own timelines and deadlines. And then I have my own stuff that has timelines and deadlines. So honestly, I don't know if someone has a great solution for that. I'd love to hear it.
Great.
I also try to be a little bit flexible in my day too for inspiration. And one other thing I will say that I have made 100% a priority for me in my life from a mental health and personal well-being perspective is exercising and meditating every morning.
Amen to that.
Unless there's something important that I can't shift or whatever, but that is something I've made a priority, and I daily sometimes fight the guilt of like, oh, but you're not getting to your desk until 11 or, whatever. And I'm like, no, this is like important. And I am much more productive. Even if I work less hours, I am much more productive if I've done those things than if I haven't.
So. Absolutely. There's so many studies that are out now about physical health and how it relates to mental health and brain function and all of those things. So I don't think anybody should ever feel guilty about getting exercise in, whether it's in the morning or however you do it. And I am a huge fan of meditation. Yeah, whatever it is and whenever it is, just fit it in because it's definitely good for brain function and brain health. And I'm a big fan of meditation. I have been for a long time. And I think when I am consistent in meditating, I can see such a difference in my life.
Yes.
And in every aspect. But if I just am consistent and I'm fitting it in every day, it just is it's a different day for me if I'm doing that. So
totally. And also I do try to take like a walk every day as well. Not like a long walk, but walk and get coffee and just I'm a big fan of walking. Also, it helps me feel more creative. I have ideas while I'm walking, so that's another thing. So I'm trying to, that was not accessible to me in the same way when I had my corporate job, of having my time be mine. So I'm trying to protect and keep that time because
absolutely,
it makes me
such
better.
A big and it is a perk of having, being able to be in charge of your own schedule, because I'm sure that there are days that you're working, into the night or on weekends or whenever you have to work. Yes. And so, being able to get out in nature it's so important, and it's such a game changer. And I can relate to, when you're on a walk, if I have something that I just can't like wrap my brain around, or I just can't seem to work out. If I take a walk, it's just like, it just works itself out. It just works itself out. I don't know, being in nature and like not thinking about it, or maybe thinking about it in a different way, being outside and moving your body just works.
Yeah.
So I can relate to that.
Yeah. Just the body brain connection. So anyways, it is solved by walking is a proverb, I think. So I believe in that.
Okay. I believe in that too.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to continue to take up so much of your time, but I loved this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you
Donna.
for like 5 more hours.
I know.
So great.
Let's keep going. Yeah, no, this was such a great conversation. And I want to thank you because, like I said, sometimes doing this, being a solopreneur and, self-employed is very lonely. And so it's really nice to have a conversation, and talk. And who doesn't feel special by being asked questions about themselves?
Absolutely. I like I said in the beginning, I mean, your writing really speaks to me, and I think it will
Thank you, Donna.
speak to others. And I hope everybody that is listening will check out your newsletter. And your business is
Thank
called
you.
Align
It's called
Digital and
Align.
Social.
Yes, Align
Align Digital
Digital
and
and
Social.
Social. And the website is alignsocialmedia.com.
Great.
And
And I will
you'll
put all that
probably link to it.
information. I will
Yeah,
put all that
yeah.
information in the notes. And I hope
Hmm.
everybody goes and checks it out. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
you and I are not finished talking. We're going to talk about a lot
No,
of
no,
stuff, and we
no.
might not be, we might have to get on another podcast and do another one because
We
there's way
might
too much.
have to do a part two. I'm open for it. I'm down for it. I love the podcast, and yeah, I will be listening and rooting for you too.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And I can't wait to see the video, the movie.
Your mouth to higher powers ear. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Girl Crush podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on this episode and my guest. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button. You can also leave me a comment about the episode. I create this show for you, and I would love to hear your feedback. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for more information on upcoming topics, guests, and some other fun content. Thanks again for being here.